how many of you have started evaluating or learning this new cool technology but gave up in between, mainly because of some setup issue or something going wrong, or you went through a tutorial but when you tried out, copy paste, Control C, Control V, it doesn't work, right? How many of you encountered those kind of issues and probably given up, right? At least a few. The rest of you are super awesome, and that's cool, right? So what we do, as you know, I do a lot of trainings on mainly on DevOps, and especially when you talk about DevOps, it's before you even get started learning about a new tool, you actually have to set up an infrastructure, because you are talking about infrastructure as a code, automating that infrastructure as a code, and when you do that, you have to simulate an infrastructure. There's no other way around, right? And what we typically do is, and when I do the trainings, we have a separate section, 2-hour session, where we do, you know, setting up the learning environment, right? And we just, you know, even if with Vagrant and virtual machines, so a typical learning environment that we create for a DevOps, even before we get started with the tool, is you start, you know, setting up a control node. Generally, if you are using Chef, it's the Chef workstation or the master. If it is Puppet, it's Puppet master. If it is Ansible, it's Ansible control node. Or even with Docker, you may have your orchestration tools and stuff, right? And then you start launching your nodes. And a typical stack that we do for simulating an infrastructure is like, you know, let's say you have 4 nodes and a control node that gives you like 5-node cluster, and that's a decent sized cluster to start trying out a new thing there. And this is even before you get started with the tool, and then you have to go install the utilities, you have to go, you know, configure it, you have to authenticate, set up the authentication, and it takes a couple of hours at the least to do that, even using the tutorials, all the tutorials that you use, right? And that's the typical environment that you would require to get started writing an infrastructure as a code. Now, coming to writing infrastructure as a code, you also need to write a code, so you need an editor as well, right? And you set up another editor and then start writing your code and fiddling around with it, right? So the tool that we are offering you here, and it's an open source tool, it's not us, but it's, you know, I would like you to start contributing to it as well. It offers you an IDE editor. How many of you know about Cloud9, C9, recently acquired by AWS? We're talking about AWS a lot. It's very similar to that, but Cloud9 is an awesome tool, but it's a very it's a generic IDE environment for all sort of development tools. What we thought of doing, and this is the problem statement that we were trying to solve, was what about DevOps tools, right? Like when we talk about Chef and Puppet and Docker, and there's no syntax highlighting, there is no specific IDE for the DevOps, and that's the IDE we are trying to build, and it is based on, it's forked from an open source tool which we are reviving right now, and we're calling it as Akurat. And Akurat is actually has a Vedic meaning, it's the name of Lord Ganesha, so we have a, you know, some mythology around it, as well as there is some, we're going to publish all that, what do you mean by Akurat actually, and why we chose that name. And that, along with that, we are also packaging the controller. Now, controller is where your software will go, right? So the Chef workstation or Ansible control node or Puppet master, whatever it is, and that's where your controller is. And then you have managed nodes. And the best part about this is you don't need 5 different VMs or 5 different nodes here. You can do it as part of one single Docker, because that's what Docker is super awesome, because you know you can actually simulate a cluster by creating some nodes. And right now we start with 4 nodes, but that will get flexible and you can launch as many nodes as you want. As many nodes really your infrastructure can support. And all of this is riding on Docker. So that's where the backend. So the front end is the IDE, backend is the Docker controller, and then we have some Docker Compose files. It's a very, very simple tool. It's a very simple tool to set up, to create, to use, and to get started with, right? And that's where Docker Compose comes in, which talks to the Docker engine, which manages all this and provisions all this infrastructure. And the best part about this is it's all packaged in one single node. So if you want to get started with learning any of these tools like Chef or Puppet or even with Docker, and if you need a web interface and IDE, you can do that in like minutes rather than in hours, right? And that's where we have codespaces.io. And codespaces.io is an open source tool, open source project rather, and it's there on GitHub, so you can visit codespaces.io, you can go to our GitHub page, please start contributing, and we would really welcome that. And let's make this as awesome product, and let's drive this innovation from here in Bangalore, right? So why not? And I'm just going to give you a very quick demo of CodeSpaces, where we have an IDE on the left hand side, and then on the right hand side I have a terminal. And on top of that, what we offer is a multi-node setup. So on the left hand side, you see this node 1, 2, 3, 4. You can actually connect to multiple nodes right from here, and that goes to another node, right? So you're already connected to SSH to one of the nodes, and we have the code here. So I'm just going to show you a very simple example of running. And so this is a 4-node cluster. I have one Ansible controller. I have 4 nodes, and I'm going to ping all of these nodes right here. And what you see there is it's been able to connect to that. It's all running on one machine. You don't need separate ID. You don't need to set up other nodes. You don't need to install softwares. Everything is Dockerized. That's what Docker is really awesome for. It's all driving through Docker images, and we're connected to 4 nodes, and I'm able to ping it. And then I'm going to run one of the code files, or the playbooks as we call in Ansible. So I'm just going to do Ansible playbook app.yaml. Yeah, and that's pretty much it, right? It appears simple, it is simple, and it gives you immediate access to a complete cluster, and you can get started with whatever you want to learn. And right now we have published 4 different code spaces for Chef, Ansible, Puppet, Docker, and we are releasing the product right here from the Devops meetup, right? So Devops and Docker and the cloud meetup. And I would like to call upon my team, so please come in, guys. And our core contributor, who's in LinkedIn, who's in US right now, his name is Santosh Sutar, and he has contributed a lot to the front end engine, right? He's not there, but round of applause for these guys. Thank you. And you can visit codespaces.io. We have a link to GitHub page. You can start experimenting with it, playing around with it. Also, please contribute. So we want you guys to drive this rather than we thinking what we need. It is all driven by the community. It should be driven by the community here, and that's why we thought of releasing it in front of the community that we have here. So thanks a lot, and do contribute, do try it out. We have a lot of bugs, so please solve it. Help us fix those, because it's the first release that we have. So with that, I'm pretty much done, and if you have any questions, I would like to